Hello, good afternoon. It is BBC Radio Solent. Now, on Ask the Expert, we have all sorts of different experts into the studio. This afternoon, very pleased to say that Mary Clegg is back in the studio. Thank you for coming in again.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's lovely to have you here. Now, Mary is a sex and relationship psychotherapist. She is our sex and relationship expert. So, as I'm sure you will understand, that the topics that we will be talking about on the show now will be very frank, very direct. Some of the questions will be very direct. We're going to talk about all sorts of things, aren't we, Mary?
I'm hoping so, yes.
So that's what we have got for you. And the way to get in touch is quite simply pick up the phone or send us a text message. 81333. Start your text with the word Solent. 81333. Start your text with the word Solent. Or you can give us a call. 0345 30 30 961. How long have you worked in this field now for, Mary?
Oh, about 15 years. I came to it late. I had all sorts of other careers in my life, but at one time I used to do remedial massage, and my clients stopped taking their clothes off and I started talking to them. So I thought, I think I need to get some training, and it went on from there.
And so you look after clients now?
Yes.
And your particular areas, what was it about them that attracted you to them?
I think, well, first of all, I think I had an interest in sexual difficulties. And, a lot of my friends were going through these difficulties, and I found that I was sort of inadequate in a way. I thought I was intelligent, knowledgeable about sex, but actually I realised I knew nothing. So in my 40s, early 50s, I started training as a psychotherapist, as a sex and relationship therapist, because I thought, you know what? If I don't know a lot, who out there can help me if I had a problem? I didn't even know a psychosexual therapist existed. So taking the training, which was in Sheffield at a fantastic clinic, the Porterbrook in Sheffield, and the training had a medical model as well as a psychological model. So I'm able to treat or diagnose. I can't treat because I'm not medically trained. So I liaise very closely with GPs and hospital consultants, especially in urology or dermatology, even if a woman has a vulval issue. So I liaise with other health professionals.
So you mentioned that, was it the psychosexual therapist?
Yes.
And I have not come across that term either. So that would encompass...
Well, what we do is we assess the sexual difficulty that person is presenting with. We take a very, very detailed history. And then we work with not only the physical aspects, we'll also work with the psychological aspects. And so if I give you an example, if a man has erectile dysfunction, mostly it is of a physical origin. So that means that he might have a vascular problem, so that the little tiny arteries don't get filled up properly with blood, and therefore he can't get an erection. So that might be how we work with him. But as a result of that difficulty, he will feel anxious, he might be depressed, and so we deal with, and I work with that. So I work with the treatment options he's got for his erectile dysfunction, and so I liaise with his doctor. I might get blood tests done and prescriptions for certain drugs, maybe like Viagra or something like that. And then I would deal with also the psychological stuff. And there may be a fallout because of the relationship. So I might work with the couple. And in fact, I find that if I work with the couple, even though one person is presenting with a sexual difficulty, we get fabulous outcomes because the partner is involved. But very often, if a man develops a problem, then very often the partner also develops a sexual difficulty.
Gosh, it's absolutely fascinating, isn't it? There's just so much more to it. That Mary is here in the studio. As you can tell, we're going to talk very frankly, very openly about this, and Mary is going to answer your questions, or maybe just talk about an area that you would like to hear some advice from her on. 0345 30 30 961. You're not going to be the first person to call. We've already got lots of questions for Mary. So if you would like to have your question as one of them, call us now. 0345 30 30 961. 0345 30 30 961. Or you can text me, 81333, start your text with the word Solent. 81333, start your text with the word Solent, and get in touch. Visage and Fade to Grey. Good afternoon. Hello, it is the Sasha Twining Show, and it is Ask the Expert. Let me just make it quite clear what we are talking about this afternoon, because we have the sex and relationship psychotherapist Mary Clegg in the studio. So they are the areas that we're going to be talking about. And if you've heard Mary before on the programme, very frank, very direct, and talking very openly about areas which we don't talk about well in this country, do we?
No, we don't at all, and we wait far too long to seek help.
When do you think we should seek help then?
I think at the point at which you are either being unable to communicate properly with each other, whether you're going to bed and hoping that the other partner's gone to sleep before you, you start taking what we call exits. In other words, you're spending more and more time apart from each other rather than actually actively spending time with each other. So at any point, because the therapy can be so successful at that point, seeking any help, just talking to somebody about your stuff in a safe place, and being honest and being frank. I think this is what we don't do very well. Stiff upper lip.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it, isn't it? And I remember almost sort of comedies from the 1980s where we just didn't talk about these things. But running at the same time, you'd have comedies from the States where you would have therapists. They would be in therapy, or they would talk about that. And America does it in a very different way.
Oh, absolutely. And I think there is a sense of the word failure. So if you have to go and see somebody to sort your stuff out, then you're a failure. You couldn't work it out for yourself. But we're not given these tools. But you wouldn't do probate of a will without going to see a solicitor. You wouldn't deal with a chest infection without going to see a doctor. So I find it quite strange. And I think people think that, especially sex therapists, that we've got two heads. Or we might make them undress or do weird and wonderful things, but we don't do any of that.
I was going to say, you don't do that.
Absolutely not. No. I would be struck off.
Do you send people away with things to go and do?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the whole point. Relationship therapy, sex therapy means that the couple or the individual have to do exercises. It might be called homework or home joy even. But if a couple haven't had sex for, say, 10 years, they're going to be standing rather awkwardly on the side of the bed saying, oh, gosh, we've got to dive in and do something now. So I have a programme which, lets them do it really, really gently and slowly.
But Mary, let's just use that as an example. A couple who have not had sex for 10 years. I can almost imagine somebody saying, well, what is the problem with that? Because if they've obviously been together for that amount of time, that is maybe now their new relationship, and that is a new normal, and they're quite happy.
Absolutely,
like that.
And I totally agree with you, Sasha. I really do, because it's important. There's even a diagnostic criteria, and the diagnostic criteria, it has to cause distress to one or other. So it doesn't matter which partner it causes distress to. Or there's another criteria called interpersonal difficulty, which means it is affecting your relationship. It might be affecting your ability even to go to work. For instance, if somebody is addicted to pornography and they're doing it all night, but they've got to get up and go to work in the morning, and say they're a lorry driver, it's quite...
Sure.
It affects their ability to function. And very often I will send people away. This isn't a problem. It is only a problem if it's a real issue between you. But if you're living a perfectly happy, celibate relationship with your partner, then that is fine.
As long as you know, I guess, that actually the other person is happy with it. And do you sometimes get instances, Mary, where actually a couple have gone on for a long time, one person has thought everything's fine, and then out of the blue, it turns out this has been festering for ages?
I think, every out of every, say, 4 clients, 1 client will come just with that presenting issue. Out of the blue. I didn't know anything was wrong. I thought everything was fine. My world has fallen apart. So the other partner has quietly been putting up with, and then in the end just can't put up with it any longer. And so literally it explodes. The whole thing explodes. And so very often they come to me in crisis. And you can't pussyfoot around with this. You need a dynamic approach. You need something you're going to take action. You're going to give them hope because they've come to you in a hopeless place. How can you fix this? How can you do anything with this? But once we start exploring it, really frankly, that's the main point of a therapist in the therapy room. The relationship that is forged between all three people, or even just two people, and the fact that they can speak safely. You know, I use a word, marital sadism. And it comes from a guy called David Schnartz in all of his work, and I love, his model. And he calls marital sadism doing something designed deliberately to hurt your partner. Okay. Right. And if I see that in my therapy room, I literally put a guillotine on it. Because I said, hey, that's not fair. That's not, that's striking below the belt. That has made that other person deeply wounded. You can't do that.
But this is, actually, I'm going to bring in a question now from Tracy, who says, I don't want to go into detail about what the issues are, but I am so worried about upsetting my husband by telling him the truth. And that is...
Absolutely. She's got to find a way of being able to tell him. And this is why sometimes therapy is, or using a therapist as I'm sometimes the gatekeeper. So I can say, okay, so what is it, Tracy, that you want to say to Fred? And you've obviously had a few issues in the past. What do you think they are and where do you think they've come from? And then I'll leave the space. And if Fred wants to, he may react in certain ways, but he'll still be held, because the whole point of therapy is to hold somebody so they can hear something. Maybe that's a place where they need to grow, to change. If they're not aware of their impact on their partner, and their partner, like Tracy, is being impacted by this partner, then, that person may be totally unaware, which is why it comes out of the blue. I thought everything was hunky-dory, and it wasn't. So with her, either she's got to sit down and summarise where she's coming from, be absolutely crystal clear. She can also say, do you know what, Fred? I'm about to tell you a few things. I'm not very happy about telling you this. I'm very afraid of hurting you, but I feel I've got to say this. And also listen to his response. So one of the things that certainly in therapy I would teach is active listening. It is so important that somebody is heard. So often, you see, this particular lady may not have had a voice. Never had a voice in her life.
Or she may, we know nothing about that other than she's saying she doesn't want to go into detail about it, but it may well be that it's a relationship that's gone on for a while and it would now be too painful to go back.
Yes, absolutely. The thing is that, in any couple therapy, sometimes we'll separate a couple, but we help them to separate amicably. So if we are coming up against brick walls and love has really died, then, you have to accept that terrible truth. But, Tracy may also have been saying vicariously, what's the matter? But her partner hasn't been listening.
OK, I don't have a name for this one. I'm going to give you the question now, Mary, and then I'll get your answer after the travel news, OK? So let me just read what I have here. This person says, Mary, I'd be more than happy for my husband to go elsewhere for sex. We've only been married a few years, but I'm on a certain type of treatment that has drastically reduced my sex drive. I don't want it to be an issue between us, but I'm starting to resent it. I love our relationship. We work really well. I enjoy intimacy with cuddles and hugs, etc., but I do not want sex. The treatment is likely to continue for a considerable amount of time, and I would like to suggest this to him, but I would like your advice. Mary, we'll get your advice in just a moment. This is BBC Radio Solent. This is how you get in touch with us this afternoon to speak to Mary Clegg. 0345 30 30 961. 0345 30 30 961. On the show this afternoon for Ask the Expert, Mary Clegg, our sex and relationship psychotherapist, in the studio. We're talking very openly and very directly about these matters this afternoon and taking your questions as well. Thank you for your emails, those who have been getting in touch via email. And a guy who's just calling himself David in Hampshire. David, thank you for your email. We're going to talk about your question in just a moment. But first, Mary, your advice, please, for someone who doesn't give their name, but this was their question that they got in touch with me earlier about. This person says, I'd be more than happy for my husband to go elsewhere for sex. We've been married for a few years, but I'm on treatment that has drastically reduced my sex drive. I don't want it to be an issue between us, but I am starting to resent it. I love our relationship. I enjoy cuddles and hugs, etc., but I do not want sex. This treatment is likely to continue for a long amount of time, and I want to suggest this to him, but I would like your advice. What do you think, Mary?
Gosh, there's so much there. There's so much there. This person, is it a lady or a gentleman? We're not quite sure.
It could be either. This person talks about their husband, so it could be either.
Okay. They're coming to terms with the fact that they're ill and they're on medication which lowers their libido. They haven't been married for very long, which means that this is a fairly new relationship. Doesn't matter how old you are, it's a new relationship. So there's a lot of sadness and loss and grief going on here. I'm not at all sure that actually, even if she was to give permission to her husband to talk about it, let's assume it's a lady just for the moment, although I'm not doing any heterosexual bias here.
No, sure.
But this would be absolutely critical to be able to talk this through with a health professional and with her partner. Because I think that, when we talk about what is sex can be many, many different things. And it may be that certain part of, the person's anatomy are not working as they should. So maybe arousal is not there, and certainly desire's not there if the libido isn't intact. But discussing this openly with a partner, I think that you can come up. And certainly with a lot of my couples, they come up with really novel solutions to these kinds of problems. And it may well bring them closer, because I think that if the partner were to seek sex elsewhere, I really do feel, this is my opinion, and, others may disagree with me, but my opinion would be steer clear of that, because that really isn't an avenue to explore at this moment. I think other avenues, communicating really efficiently and well with each other, the impact of the illness on the person herself and the partner, really, really important. I work for the Rheumatoid Arthritis Association, and we look at sexuality with chronic illness. And actually you can be incredibly inventive so that the loving and the caressing and the intimate play can be there, but you don't necessarily have to have penetrative sex. So sex can be a lot of different things that they can both get a lot of pleasure out of.
Reading this one again, when I just read it to you, I mean, do you ever, or could you ever see, because what you are talking about, Mary, is for this couple to come to some sort of agreement where there is some sort of sex, whatever that is.
Yes.
And yet this person says that he or she starting to resent it. I mean,
but resent what? I'm not sure what she's resenting. You see, so even in picking apart just that little bit that's said, there's so much information. I need to be a detective. Okay, and that's a lot of my work, is unpicking. Actually, what do you mean? What do you resent? Why do you resent it? What part do you resent? Do you resent that you haven't got a libido? Do you resent that your partner is, sulking because they're not having any sex? What's happening? So I think, with all of this is very complex. This isn't, easy peasy work. That's why, as a psychosexual therapist, we do undergo quite a lot of extra training, because this is complicated.
Let me move on to an email which I've just got from someone who's just calling themselves David in Hampshire. And this is... David, thank you for emailing this, and I don't know whether you've ever sort of put this down in words before, but we really appreciate you getting in touch today. This is his email. He says, When I was a child, I attended a boarding school. At the school, I was sexually abused. That was 30 years ago, but it still affects me now. I've been married for over 20 years, and my poor wife and I very rarely have sex because I can't get the abuse out of my mind. We do have kids who are now adults. Do you think I should try and get help even at this stage? My wife doesn't say anything, but I know it's very unfair on her.
Absolutely seek help. Absolutely, because there's so much that can be done for both of them. Because we are dealing with the resolute spouse of somebody who, for various reasons, isn't really able to engage in pleasurable sexual activity, and may well be rabbit in the headlights, when he's actually in a sexual situation. Yes, there's a lot that can be done to help both of them, and it's never, ever too late. It isn't too late.
I can't imagine, though, the difficulty of this. He said this happened over 30 years ago, so that's carrying something around for 30 years.
Well, if you understand that our trauma can be in our childhood, and the earlier that trauma happens in our lives, so say, for instance, it's under 5, the more difficult they are to resolve because they are deeply imprinted in the psyche.
Really? So,
Yeah.
so if these things happen when you are, well, there's never an easier time.
No.
But it is even more difficult as if you are particularly young.
Yeah. Yes. So the younger you are, and he doesn't say what age he went
to
boarding school.
30 years ago,
Yeah.
but I don't...
But even as a teenager, so say, for instance, he was a teenager and he went to boarding school and was abused. There's a lot of things that happen here, and it is about power, it is about vulnerability, and it's about grooming. And when a child is groomed, they take on the guilt and the shame. And I want to give the shame back to the perpetrator.
Yeah.
I really do.
There's so much in that email, and it's not for us to suggest whether David takes other action. He may already have done.
And I wish him, I really do wish him well. There's some fabulous therapists in Hampshire.
Okay, so where does he start?
Well, I think if he Googled sex therapy, COCERT is my organisation, and there's a list of therapists there. We're all trained to work with sexual abuse. So that's the College of Sex and Relationship Therapists.
Right, so you don't have to find a particular therapist who is trained in abuse, because if you are trained as a sex therapist, that will be part of the training.
It will be part of your training, and they will actually put it out there, in directories. But, there are some really good people working there. Rape Crisis, also employ people. So, any of the refuge or sexual abuse services. So even if you put in therapy for sexual abuse, you will get. But you do need to make sure that your therapist is suitably trained to work with this. This is complex stuff.
Yeah, and it is utterly, there are no words. It's utterly despicable what happened to David. And
if I can just say, part of the programme, Focus on Unity, that I run, stabilises the couple. And in this case, David would need to be stabilised before he and his wife could engage in anything that is intimate.
And do you deal with couples where this has been, these sorts of abuse issues have been dealt with or have happened in the past? And do some of those couples also go down the lines of reporting finally? And again, I have no idea whether David might have already done this. Obviously, anything like this needs to be reported. This needs to have action like that taken.
Historically, I think there isn't a good track record with reporting and then getting action.
No.
Some time ago, I had a client who had gone through horrific sexual abuse, and it did go to court. The police were furious, but for one reason or another, the man didn't get prosecuted, so he was let off. And so I said to my client, "So he's still out there." And we can do nothing. And she said, "That's why I'm coming to see you now," because she said, "I have to deal with not only the abuse that was done to me, but to actually reconcile the fact that the court case ended with the guy getting off."
David, we wish you the very, very, very best.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me give one final question for you, Mary. I'm trying to do as many as possible, but obviously, listening to this, you understand that they do take their time. This is another lengthier email. This one says, and again, no name on this one, I want to know if your expert has any advice for parents with young teenagers. I've got a son and daughter, 15 and 13, both becoming more independent and are challenging to say the least, particularly the 15-year-old boy. My husband, who is not their biological father but has raised them as his own from when they were 10 and 8, seems to be backing off. I'm being the one to try and lay boundaries. He is being too slack. He thinks I'm being too harsh. I personally am so exhausted and upset by how lonely I now feel that I don't really like him much. He seems to think our relationship should now start to be more about us. He's booking a weekend on our own. He wants nights out. I just want to be mum when I think they need me, and I'm beginning to feel torn. I just don't know what to do. I'm existing because I don't have the energy to tackle it. Is that,
That's a very common one.
Is it?
Yeah, a very common one, because you see, if there's been the children were sort of 8 and 10 when the marriage broke, or the relationship with their biological father broke up. So there will have been a history of something going on, even if the couple didn't row ever in front. There will be atmospheres which the children will have picked up on. So very often, again, the response that I have to have as a therapist is a timely response, because if there's young children involved in any marriage breakup or marriage difficulties, or I call, that's my shorthand for long-term relationship, you have to act fast, because the children are affected. Once you start settling the parents and getting them to communicate better, guess what? The kids stop acting out. So what's happening with these teenagers is they're acting out because there's something going on that we're not seeing. So it may be the distress, it may be the anger, it may be the frustration and disappointment, all sorts of things. Certainly, this has been going on for a long time. So for this mother, she needs her children to know that she is available to them. And when they want to talk to her about their difficulties, she is willing to sit and listen. Not judge, not preempt, not even fix. Just listen.
And then, but this person's got in touch because it appears it's her own relationship now of her husband, the one who's not the biological father, but she is now with and has raised the children. He says, or he seems to think, she says, our relationship should now start to be more about us. He's booking a weekend on our own. He wants nights out, but I just want to be there for the children. I've paraphrased that last bit.
OK, well, there's a relationship family dynamic going on here. If I was to draw a diagram, it is the mother and the 2 children. And so if you draw a circle round them, and then you draw a circle round him, he's on the outside. He's lonely because she's put everything into the 2 children. And she's now resenting the fact that they're getting older, maybe not needing her so much. And they have, he's recognised that relationship needs help. So, yes, of course. But you've got to start talking. If he says, I'd like to go away for a weekend and I've already planned it, but hey, she needs to buy into this. So they've got to do some midnight talking. They've got to try and talk it out in a way where they don't get blaming or defensive. They've got to find a way, and it's called active listening.
Mary, it has been fantastic to have you on the show this afternoon. You do a whole programme of relationship therapy for couples, which you take them over a long amount of time. Was it up to 15 sessions?
Well, it can be up to 15 sessions, but you don't need to see a relationship therapist every week. So you might see them fortnightly, but you've got lots of work to do in between. So 15 sessions may be over 6 months or even a year. But the ones that stay the course do the best.
It's been great to have you on the show again. Thank you very much for coming in. Thank you for answering all the different questions, and thank you as well for getting in touch. And I hope we were able to pick out enough questions from different areas, so I hope there would have been advice that may have been applicable to your situation as well. Mary Clegg, our sex and relationship psychotherapist, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
You're welcome, Sasha.